Fabulous. Hello, hello.
Hello.
It's always a fun few moments as we wait for everybody to join. So we'll give everybody about a minute or so before we do intros. As people are joining, go ahead and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Cool. We can go ahead and get started, at least with a little bit of an introduction. So, welcome everyone to another episode of Christina's Compliance Corner. I'm Cristina. I host this LinkedIn Live every other week, and it's an approachable conversation with opinions and insights into all things compliance, security, and privacy. And today we have a very special guest, Robert Coe, who is from AcuityMD. He is one of the co-founders and I believe also the CTO, correct, Robert? Yeah.
Yep.
And so we will definitely be getting into the meat of this, but want to give Robert an opportunity to introduce himself and to kind of talk a little bit about his background and, you know, what it's like being the CTO and co-founder of Acuity. It's a very exciting opportunity for us, and then we'll talk about, you know, why you're the guest.
Awesome. Thanks, Cristina. Yeah, happy to be here. Robert Coe, CTO and co-founder of AcuityMD. So my background's from enterprise software, kind of in the product and engineering world. Was at a MarTech company before this. But AcuityMD, we're a commercial platform built specifically for the medical device industry. So our thousands of sales and marketing professionals use our software to do things like identify target markets, grow their pipeline, surface new opportunities, and kind of just grow their business overall. So AcuityMD, we are backed by Benchmark at Redpoint. We just crossed 60 employees kind of in North America. We're growing quickly. And as you can imagine, being in enterprise software in the US healthcare space, obviously compliance was a big concern very early on. So that's how we got hooked up with Laika and Cristina here.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome background. Definitely appreciate the context for everybody here. One of the reasons I was so excited to bring Robert to Christina's Compliance Corner today in this Hindsight series is to talk about his experience working with Laika and even, you know, not even selling as much Laika necessarily, but talking a little bit about what brought him to the compliance space, knowing that he needed to go through a SOC 2 process, what that procurement process was, and to give everyone a little bit, you know, if we have any founders here in the room or anybody who is thinking about going for their first SOC 2 or doesn't really know to approach it, you know, I think, Robert, when you and I first started working together, you were definitely not at 60 customers or employees. So that's definitely very, very exciting to see that growth over that period of time. You know, I kind of, that's a really great place for us to start. So, you know, how did you end up coming with Laika, and when did you really realize that SOC 2 was going to be something that you were going to need? I know you said obviously working in the healthcare space, you needed it, but did it come up in procurement or sales conversations? What really was the driver there?
Yeah, so really kind of take like one step before AcuityMD was my experience. Really, I was in the sales organization in Europe for my prior role, and really saw the power of procurement teams on the other side of the table when you're trying to sell software. and we were able to, whenever we walked in through the door and you guys kind of have this team staring at you, this tech company they had never heard of before, and you were able to say, hey, we're SOC 2 certified, like we're good. Everyone trying to just, that really checks the box and gets people really trusting you as a business and as a vendor, and really helps you kind of stroll through that step of the sales process. So I knew that early on that we were going to have to work in the confines of these procurement teams, especially in healthcare, which is just super regulated,
Yeah.
obviously very conservative. So from the very, very early days, even when we were just 3 people, I knew that at least building the original app, we're going to need to make sure that everything is at least prepared and ready to be compliant someday. So it was just very early on. We got introduced to Laika when you guys were also pretty small. I think your team was like 6 or 7 people at the time. So kicked off the conversation, founders to founders, got to know you guys, understood exactly kind of what your wheelhouse is, and it kind of just really meshed with kind of how we're trying to tackle things.
Yeah. I do remember some of those early days working together where I know Michael Driscoll, I see you in the comments, Michael Driscoll, our fearless customer success manager, really kind of forged the path for us there to getting through the project. But I remember you and I were kind of sitting there and I was like, what? It wasn't uncommon for us, for example, to actually work with customers who were, you were the founder, you were the CTO. How did you get tasked with going through the SOC 2? So, I know that you guys have grown and since then have actually hired somebody to take over the compliance duties. We're very thankful for him, of course. But, what were those early days like for you in terms of figuring out what you needed to do and how you needed to do it?
Yeah, so I think working with you guys early really helped at least understand all of the kind of boxes that you need to tick and all the things that you need to do, which helped us kind of for architecture and things like that. I think, yeah, it was in the early days. I'm glad that I was involved and really involved because that's not, the security and the trust that you have with your customers isn't something that you definitely want to delegate out or give to anybody anywhere close to. That's not in the executive level. So
Right.
it was great to kind of have that background. It's been awesome to have our VP of engineering and our head of kind of core infrastructure really lean in and pick up where I failed, or not failed, but kind of didn't fully run through it all myself, because as a founder, you've got a million different things going on. And it turned out that this process we got the ball rolling, and then it was great to we kind of really ramped it up when it became more and more pressing of a time concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great experience.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the things that you and I have definitely talked about, and I've talked about with a lot of my other customers who are pursuing SOC 2 for the first time or are in that type of niche area of being really small, hyper growth, things like that, how do you prioritize, what to do in terms of compliance and whether to, for example, hire somebody to take over the responsibilities or to focus on implementing the policies and procedures so that then like growth can follow in those footsteps, for example, in continue those good habits, I've probably said before. So, when you have so much to juggle and you have to handle a project such as SOC 2, how did you manage that?
Yeah, I think with a many different competing priorities, I think as our engineering team grew, our product kind of started becoming more widespread in the market, and we were kind of growing within our accounts, where procurement became a bigger concern. Was we definitely needed an engineering leader who has done this before. I haven't gone through SOC 2 before this company personally, so it was a great kind of thing that we actually recruited for in the early days to find our VP of engineering was like, hey, we want someone who can run this process as well. So that was one of the many things we were looking for,
Right.
or at least someone who had the capability to do it. But it was definitely very nice to have that he's done it before. So that was when it came up as a priority. It was really just it was one of those things we knew we were going to hire for it. The average time to find a VP of engineering is something like 18 months. It took us about that. So that kind of knowing that this person was going to be responsible for it kind of made the timing really work out. And kind of as soon as he joined, it's like, cool, now we're a little bit behind on it in terms of where we wanted to be, but we knew we had the right person in place. So as with just all startup hiring is like, if you're going to do something like 10% good, that you're going to hire someone for who's going to do it 10 times better than you, sometimes you end up waiting for that person, which is just part of the hard part of building a business.
Right, of course. And I'm sure that we could talk about just building the business and the challenges that come with that. But, we have a really good question from the audience. Would love to know if you found SOC 2 to be an unexpected surprise you weren't expecting in the procurement process, or when did the light bulb go off that you guys were going to need it? I know you touched on this a little bit in your intro, but I think, any additional context is,
Yeah, sure
did it
thing. Yeah,
actually?
so I don't think SOC 2 is actually that no one's actually come and said you need to have exactly this SOC 2 yet, given that we were a small startup when we were originally going to market. So they had the 600 question questionnaire of basically exactly all the things that you would want to cover in SOC 2. We got thrown that and definitely saw that coming because it's enterprise software. So these are Fortune 500 companies. They have all these procurement processes in place for good reason. They didn't say you have to have SOC 2 Type 2 to get to work with us. But at the time, it's with a 12-person startup. I'm glad that they didn't actually. We checked all the boxes and we went through procurement. So it wasn't. It's not a huge surprise for us, but it definitely helps.
Yeah. Colt, it definitely does help, as you could tell. I definitely want to kind of touch on that a little bit too, because I think one of the misconceptions or myths around this is that you don't need it until somebody asks for it. And we definitely, especially here at Laika, you're already kind of behind the ball if somebody's already asking for it rather than providing it. I think you were definitely prudent in getting it before somebody asked for it, because you are so right. When you operate in a space like the space you're in, or really any other type of highly regulated, and especially with what's come out recently in the news and under the Biden administration, tech companies are needing to take a lot more responsibility for making sure that they're taking matters into their own hands. So I definitely think that you were a very wise company to make that a management priority early on. I think at this point, it's probably relevant for us to talk a little bit about, the actual audit process itself and the implementation and potential challenges that you had along the way that might have actually been around the project itself. I know you weren't as closely involved in the audit directly towards the end, but what challenges came up throughout the implementation or readiness process, and how did that kind of work itself out?
Yeah, I think the challenges are kind of just a lot of the times building a lot of processes and documentation kind of from the ground up. Those are things that you can kind of skate past as you are building a product. But things like a full-blown incident response process where and then you're documenting all these things, business continuity, disaster planning, all of those things and processes that are absolutely critical, kind of standing that up and building that from scratch and making sure that those are up to snuff. That's a decent chunk of work. So just making sure that as the first time going through this, understanding what's actually entailed of all that is really, really important. And it's a lot of effort to do. And then, other forms of documentation, just making, and kind of also to the point of trying to get more people involved and trying to get help in this process. Like I mentioned, bringing on new team members laying out our entire architecture and making sure that that's all documented. That's also a pretty big lift as well, to make sure that every single piece of infrastructure is documented and understood of what
Yeah.
it does.
Yeah. And I definitely, I know, Michael, you posted about the risk assessment in the chat. Definitely, especially in anything in the healthcare space, but we're definitely seeing it as a bigger point, I would say, across the board. The risk assessment has got to be one of the biggest cornerstones of any type of compliance program. And many times, even in in the procurement process, those 600 SIG questions, SIG lights, or whatever it might be, the risk assessment is like an absolute bare minimum requirement to have in some capacity. And I think that sometimes people don't realize that, at that point, you might as well have the full blown, or you should have the full blown program that goes along with it to be able to actually adequately use it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that what you speak to around policy documentation and procedure and making sure that everybody's involved, I think you did a really good job of making sure that, you might have been the point person on the project, but you were the technical lead, right? You were the CTO. So yes, you totally could do all the engineering, the technical components, things like that, but policies that needed to touch the rest of the organization. How did you actually find that, the rest of your organization took to this type of change and implementation of, a lot of times people call putting a SOC 2 kind of like it's like growing up a little bit. You really you gotta grow up and actually start doing things by the book. How did the rest of your organization take the process?
Yeah, I think the rest of the org, I think they're kind of the people operations and the
Yeah.
biz ops side of the house. I mean, our team's amazing over there, and they were kind of eager to mature things and be ahead of the game. Things like we're a full remote company, so we kind of need our ducks in a row just to even run the business,
Yeah.
and like have a good onboarding experience, make sure people are like aligned and all of that stuff. So all of that stuff is really, really important to us from the get go. So it's really good to get that kind of as part of our general processes early, knowing that we're going to grow, knowing that we're going to continue to be all remote, and knowing that we're going to have to kind of continually improve in the SOC 2 realm. So things like just buttoning up all of our people processes, documentation, everything, all that grown up stuff. Our team was really, really receptive to, and the people operations side like took it up. We worked with some software vendors to really kind of centralize everything.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, like the current tooling and stuff is like there's a lot of really good stuff out there
Yeah.
to help teams do that. So yeah, really thankful for our teams to be open to that kind of thing. So definitely, I wouldn't say it slows us down, but it's definitely no longer kind of five people in a room coding anymore
Right.
as a startup. You're kind of grown up.
Yeah. And I think though that, we won't say any type of names here, but I think knowing who you were selling into and some of your bigger players, did you feel like an especial need to make sure that, you put your money where your mouth is? And while you might not be like a 10-person startup, or you might have been at the time, you know, do you feel that getting a SOC 2 or going through that process gave you a little bit more credibility in the room when you were going through that?
Totally. Yeah. I think when you're able to say that you're certified or working on it or close and have
Yeah.
some other external vendor also kind of giving you some street cred there,
Yeah.
helps enormously. Even if they do realize that you're a 10-person company, they
Right.
like your product, but then they just even like your champion in an enterprise sales conversation is they're going to be all gung ho about you, and they're going to be consistently worried about this IT procurement step, the bigger the company that they work at. So if you're able to kind of assuage their concerns early, get on their side, and then you actually end up on being on IT procurement side, and if you walk into those conversations with the right things in hand, you just build a
Yeah.
better level of trust with their business and earns you the right to grow the business later on.
Yeah, totally. And I know I think that all of that is such good points. And I think the other really important component there is like, getting your foot in the door with one of them and building the credibility with one of them really kind of does set the ball in motion for building that platform for other ones to be like, oh, okay, well, XYZ believes in them. So like, we can like move forward with more. So, um, you know, to more continued success for you guys on that large enterprise buyer scale. So a really, really awesome question came in. So has learning more about SOC 2 and compliance changed how you vet partners and vendors? If so, how? Which I think this is particularly important because people forget that, it does go both ways. And there is a vendor due diligence component of SOC 2. So as much as they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them too, and so on down the line. So would love to hear your take.
Yeah. Another thing that it's good to be kind of early on is vetting your vendors for things like this, because if you're working with a partner that it doesn't have the right things in place, and
Yeah.
especially if you're putting critical infrastructure on there, you're putting yourself at risk. So it was definitely good to be on that side of the table. And now, like when we're ever buying software, we just make sure that this person has their ducks in a row, and if they don't, that's a big red flag. Especially the software that I'm personally buying for, like getting for our company, is usually kind of developer tooling and things like that, where this stuff is just, you can't be a business without it. So it's one of those things that we make sure to check the box. And when you're a small company too, you might just be grabbing software off the shelf just to get stuff built and not actually kind of reading the fine print, which is really important.
Yeah. Sorry, we got a barking dog here. Um, awesome. Cool. Well, the last bit of this that I wanted to touch on was going to be any major takeaways you have for other first, tips, tricks, all of that you have for any other first time goers, or even for somebody who might be sitting here questioning whether it is absolutely necessary or not.
Yeah, I think one learning was just like, I had direct experience with this, kind of working in the engineering world and then also on the sales conversation. But it's not something that everyone just intuitively understands or gets. So just kind of making sure that communicating that with either your co-founders or the executive team, just making sure that everyone in the company understands why you're kind of doing all these things, and how critical it is. I think when you'll kind of and it's a thing that you'll only bear fruit much later on.
Right.
But if you start sailing through big enterprise deals, procurements, you'll really realize how big of a thing it was. And also just from a kind of infrastructure and IT point of view, is like the earlier you do this stuff, the better, because going back and ripping out vendors to be better, or building structures and processes as like 1,000-person company is really way more work than it is as a 20-person company. So that, yeah, at a prior life, I saw that at 1,000-person company, kind of going back and trying to do this process, versus for us, it was a couple people just hammering a couple things out for months with Laika's help. So early, and then just making sure that everyone understands why are the big things I'm happy that we did right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it couldn't be better. And I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything you're saying, because also I think about that all the time, because it was unbelievable how many customers I worked with in my prior life who had to unlearn all of those bad habits with all of those employees and things like that, and with so much software and so much more complexity and things like that. And it's just so much work. So building from, and you also mentioned earlier in one of your kind of comments also that, this is something that you're going to need to do this year, and you're going to need to do it for a long time moving forward, and you'll need to mature it and things like that. So laying that foundation for yourself definitely sets you up for success. So
Yeah, that was another thing that definitely learning of the process was that, like, they get stricter over time, and you need to mature, and the process itself, like, you need to get better every year. It's not just a single watermark that you have to hit and stay above. It's going to get harder. which was a really important learning.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, any other questions for Robert? What a fabulous guest he has been today. Definitely make sure to check out AcuityMD if you are in the space. And I know Amanda is posting right now. We will be also hosting a very special edition of Christina's Compliance Corner in 2 weeks, which is going to highlight women in compliance to celebrate International Women's Month. So any additional questions that come through, let us know. And, as always, Robert, we really appreciate your time and your awesome insights for customers. I know it'll be in prospects in the future. I know that there will be a lot of people that will love this. So
yeah. Well, thanks, Cristina. Yeah, this was fun.
yeah.
And I'll catch you in a bit. Yeah. Good
All
to see
right,
you.
guys. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.